It is my privilege to be here at the home of my colleague, Professor Nicolas de Sadeleer in Forêt, or Forest, Brussels, to discuss his latest book, the second edition of Environmental Principles from Political Slogans to Legal Rules, published by Oxford University Press. Set in beautiful natural surroundings, as the name suggests, Forêt, or Forest, is an apt place to find a professor of environmental law. Yet, at the same time, the tranquility and the greenness of these surroundings might stand in stark contrast to the environmental crisis currently facing the world. And indeed, it is this crisis that provides the context for your monograph, which aims to determine the status of three key environmental principles: the Polluter-Pays principle, the prevention principle, and the precaution principle, and to evaluate their contribution to the construction of environmental law, whether nationally, at EU level, or internationally. And actually, the first edition of this book was published in 2002 and, at the time, offered a valuable contribution to the debate surrounding environmental principles and their application, namely by opening new avenues for reflection on evolving international norms. However, environmental principles have since been thoroughly examined by the legal literature. Considering this, what is the added value of your monograph? Why return to principles already considered and analysed by you and other scholars?
Regardless the quality of the other legal works, it occurred to me that most of this analysis focused either on a set of principles within a single legal order or exclusively on one single principle, such as a precautionary principle. And the added value of my analysis is this transversal approach, embarking upon international public law, international economic law, as well as EU law, and a number of domestic legal regimes ranging from US law to Australian law. In addition to this, it occurs to me that many authors did not link up these environmental principles to general principles of law, such as proportionality, non-discrimination, good faith, legitimate expectation, legal certainty. And in my work, I constantly emphasize the intersections, the interaction between environmental principles on the one hand and the other general principles of law on the other hand. The second added value is the sheer breadth of the debate surrounding precaution or Polluter-Pays principles with respect to environmental tax, with respect to carbon taxes. And it occurred to me that there was a need to hone my arguments with respect to the legal functions and the legal status of these three principles within different legal orders. Thirdly, often people tend to look at environmental law per se, standing alone without any interactions with other legal disciplines. In my book, I constantly discuss the manner in which these principles can influence other legal areas, such as tort law, criminal law, economic law. Fourthly, and I imagine this is the key added value that has been emphasized by a number of reviewers beforehand, is that in many legal analysis, legal framework, theoretical framework is missing, is lacking. And in the first edition, I stressed that there is a transition between postmodern law to modern law, from rigid, abstract general rules to much more flexible rules, norms. And the key drivers of these transitions did not fade away these last 20 years. To the contrary, they were exacerbated by a number of trends, rolling back environmental regulations, watering down environmental procedures, getting rid, like the US Trump administration did lately, a number of environmental safeguards. And so my legal theoretical analysis still makes sense against this background.
Environmental law is rife with principles of different nature found in a multitude of legal instruments, including, for example, the principles of sustainable use, of ecological solidarity, of proximity and self-sufficiency. The list goes on. Considering the richness and the variety of this legal landscape, Why did you place the focus on only 3 principles, the Polluter-Pays, prevention and precautionary principles? Is your analysis not too narrow?
Yes, as a matter of course, environmental law is rife with principles. One is juggling with a flurry of principles ranging from extremely technical principles like waste minimization, so the principles of proximity, to extremely broad notions such as sustainable development. Many international treaties enshrined a litany of environmental principles. By the same token, domestic statutes list a huge number of environmental principles. So it occurred to me that it was impossible to cover in one single monograph all these 30, 40, 50 principles. It was much better just to focus on 3 principles for several reasons. The first reason is that the Polluter-Pays, as well as prevention and precaution, stand alongside, next to each other, in a number of international environmental treaties, as well as in a number of domestic statutes. Secondly, in the case law of Supreme Courts, often they do stress a breach of both preventions and precaution. Thirdly, it occurred to me that there is a theoretical background that justify the focus on these 3 principles. In a nutshell, Polluter-Pays principles relates to a curative approach under which state authorities clean up contaminated land, restored degraded habitats, polluted ecosystems. The difficulties with that approach is that somewhat too late, the polluter pays and the state authorities intervened, paying a very hefty sums in order to restore degraded ecosystems. So polluter pays has to be accompanied, has to be buttressed by a preventive approach, according to which the state authorities are setting forth standards above which the ecological damage is deemed to be unacceptable. However, that second approach does not take into consideration the long-term uncertainties we do face in environmental science. You know the saying that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. However, this is still a blind faith in certain science, in the certainty science can deliver. And that's leading to a third model to which the precautionary principle is related, is the model of anticipations, under which state authorities are called on to take action to prevent risks that are likely to entail severe, significant, irreversible damages in spite of the lingering uncertainties. So I did link up these 3 principles to these 3 models of thought.
One could argue that the principles you have focused on, the Polluter-Pays, prevention and precautionary principles, are in fact deprived of a universal scope because, in reality, they depend upon the regulatory context upon which they operate. Does your analysis sufficiently consider the sheer differences between the different legal orders you explore? Does this difference not somehow undermine the universal scope of these principles?
That was the most significant challenge I faced in updating the book, to juggle with extremely diverse legal systems ranging from common law to civil law. I'm fully aware of the sheer differences between US administrative law and EU administrative law. Just look at the civil law family. There are significant differences between Italy, France, Belgium. So I did emphasize the background, the constitutional backgrounds against which each of these principles do operate. That being said, the fact that the meaning of each principle depends upon the regulatory context within which they operate does not deprive these principles of legal effects or of a general scope. And I would like to put forward 2 arguments. Firstly, the fact that these three principles are enshrined in a variety of multilateral agreements ranging from water pollutions to water courses, signifies that they have a cross-cutting nature. Secondly, be it the no-harm principle, be it the principle of prevention, be it the due diligence placed upon states to conduct environmental impact assessment or to prevent significant damage caused to other damage, means that these principles are vested with the authority of customary rules. And so, all in all, it occurs to me that the general scope of these principles is not undermined by the specificity of each legal system.